Have you ever sipped your morning tea only to realize it might be a ticket to your own demise? Hello, I'm Jake, and this is my story about a day that began with a simple cup of tea and nearly ended everything. I woke up on a crisp, clear morning with the comforting sounds of birds chirping outside my window. The sun was barely peeking through, casting a soft glow over our home. Everything seemed normal, yet deep down, I felt that something was off. As I stretched and prepared for the day, Lydia called out from the kitchen, her tone unusually upbeat. "Your tea's ready," she said. Stepping into the kitchen, I was greeted by the familiar warmth of home, but immediately, an unexpected, pungent odor hit me like a cold shower. It was a sharp, chemical stench with an undercurrent of something rotten, something entirely out of place in our cozy morning ritual. I froze, cup in hand, my mind racing through a barrage of unsettling thoughts. What in the hell was that smell? "Honey, what the fuck is that smell?" I blurted out, unable to hide my rising panic. Lydia's smile faltered for a split second before she tried to cover it up. "It's just a new herbal blend. Nothing to worry about," she replied, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as they darted away. I couldn't help but take a cautious sip, and the taste that followed was even more disturbing. A bitter, almost toxic flavor that sent a jolt of fear straight to my gut. "This isn't normal tea," I muttered, half to myself and half to her, my voice tight with suspicion. Every instinct screamed that something was horribly wrong. The once comforting kitchen now felt ominous and cold. Every creak of the floor, every hum of the refrigerator, amplified my growing dread. "Lydia, did you add something extra to the tea?" I pressed, my tone a mix of anger and confusion. Her response was a stuttered denial. I didn't do anything unusual," she mumbled, though I noticed her hands trembling as she set down the teapot. In that tense silence, the simple cup of tea transformed into a symbol of betrayal. It wasn't just a beverage. It was a clue, a glaring red flag that hinted at a hidden agenda I never saw coming. My heart pounded as I struggled to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the inexplicable signs of danger that now filled our home. That morning, the ordinary routine shattered, leaving me with a gnawing need to uncover the truth behind the sinister aroma. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a cascade of revelations that would turn my world upside down, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and loyalty. That unnerving taste from the tea clung to me all morning. By mid-morning, as Lydia busied herself in the dining room, I realized I couldn't just sit on my growing suspicions. Something had to be done, even if it meant taking a small, calculated risk. The dining room was quiet except for the soft clink of silverware being arranged on the table. Two identical cups sat side by side, each holding the last sips of our morning tea. I glanced at Lydia, who was absorbed in her own world, chatting briefly on the phone with someone I couldn't place. In that moment, I decided to act. With a mixture of trepidation and resolve, I reached for my cup, sliding it ever so gently to the spot where hers had been. In one swift, almost imperceptible motion, I exchanged our cups. Each movement felt monumental, as if with every gesture, I was peeling back layers of a secret I never wanted to uncover. A few minutes later, as we both settled back at the table, I couldn't shake the feeling that this simple swap might reveal more than just a mix-up. "Lydia," I began in a tone that was calm but edged with tension. "This tea, it tastes off, doesn't it? Almost like it's laced with something chemical. Did you change anything in the recipe?" She paused, taking a deliberate sip from the cup now in front of her. "Off? I used the same old blend," she replied, her voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. "Then why does it taste so damn bitter? And why does it feel like we're not even drinking from the right cups?" Her eyes flickered to the teapot before darting back to mine. "Maybe it's the water, or maybe you're just overthinking things," she mumbled, though her tone lacked conviction. I couldn't help but press on. "I'm not trying to be a prick here, but something's seriously wrong. That cup swap, was that intentional? Because it sure as hell feels like you wanted me to notice." For a split second, Lydia's face drained of color. I don't know what you mean," she stuttered, clearly rattled. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the unspoken admission that our ordinary morning was morphing into something far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. In that quiet dining room, amidst the clatter of cutlery and the hum of a refrigerator in the background, every small detail screamed of hidden agendas. That subtle act of swapping cups had cracked the veneer of normalcy, leaving me to wonder if my life was about to unravel into a web of deceit I never saw coming. After the unsettling tea incident, my day took a sharper turn toward the uncanny. The house felt quieter than usual, as if even the walls were listening. I tried to push away the earlier unease, but small details kept surfacing, demanding attention. It was late morning when my phone rang. The ringtone was unfamiliar, jarring in the silence of our living room. I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" I said cautiously. A gravelly voice responded, barely audible. "You need to watch your back. Trust no one." The line went dead almost instantly. I stared at the phone, heart pounding, wondering if it was a prank or a deliberate message meant for me. The cryptic warning left me with more questions than answers. Later that day, while walking down the hall, I caught sight of Mr. Simmons, our elderly neighbor, leaning on his gate. He looked at me with an expression that mingled concern and something else. Fear, maybe? "Saw you arguing this morning, son. Just be careful," he murmured before shuffling away. His words were vague yet unsettling, as if he knew more than he let on. Inside the house, I couldn't shake the memory of Lydia's furtive glances. In the kitchen, while she pretended to tidy up, I noticed her eyes darting toward a locked drawer in the cabinet, a drawer she usually ignored. When I casually asked about it, she brushed it off with a laugh. "Just old junk, nothing important." But her tone and the way she quickly closed the door didn't add up. During lunch, I scrolled through old messages on my phone, recalling a conversation from months ago where Lydia had hinted at financial troubles and a mysterious meeting. I couldn't tell if it was a slip of the tongue or an encrypted confession. Why would she ever lie about something like that? I muttered to myself. The seeds of doubt were now firmly planted. Even our once comfortable home felt like a stage for secrets. The subtle creaks in the floor, the soft hum of the refrigerator, all echoed like hidden voices urging me to uncover the truth. I began mentally piecing together the puzzle. The ominous phone call, the neighbor's cryptic warning, and Lydia's guarded behavior all suggested that the tea incident was just the tip of the iceberg. As the day wore on, I realized that every small detail was a clue, an invitation to dig deeper into a mystery that was rapidly spiraling out of control. The calm facade of our home had cracked, and in its place, an unsettling dread had taken hold, urging me to question everything. The tension had built to a boiling point by early afternoon. I couldn't sit in silence any longer. With the eerie echoes of earlier events still ringing in my ears, I strode into the kitchen where Lydia was clearing the table. The atmosphere was stifling, heavy with unspoken accusations. "Lydia, we need to talk," I said, my voice low and edged with anger. I grabbed a chair and sat across from her at the kitchen table, the very spot where the tea had first betrayed us. "What the fuck was that all about? That smell, that taste. Are you trying to poison me?" Her eyes widened for a split second, and she set down a dish with a clatter. "Jake, it's not what you think," she stammered, trying to regain composure. "I didn't do anything to harm you. It was just a new blend, that's all." "Just a new blend?" I repeated sharply, leaning forward so close that I could see the sweat beading on her forehead. "Then why did your eyes go cold when I asked about it? Why did you hide that locked drawer in the cabinet?" Lydia's hands trembled as she fumbled with a napkin. I told you, it's nothing. You're reading too much into a simple mistake," she replied, her voice wavering between frustration and fear. I slammed my fist on the table, the sound reverberating in the silent room. "Don't you give me that bullshit. I've heard enough half-truths today, and I'm done with it. Who are you really trying to hide something from? Or should I say, who are you fucking trying to kill?" Her face drained of color, and for a moment, I saw a flash of something dark in her eyes. "Jake, please, you're overreacting," she pleaded, her tone a mix of desperation and guilt. "I never wanted you to find out like this. I was trying to protect us. Protect me. It wasn't meant to hurt you." "Protect us?" I scoffed bitterly, pushing back my chair. What kind of protection involves nearly poisoning the man you claim to love? Explain that, Lydia. My heart pounded, every beat a painful reminder of how far this simple cup of tea had unraveled our lives. The silence that followed was deafening. Lydia's eyes darted away, unable to meet mine as she whispered, "I can't explain everything right now." The ellipsis hung between us like a death sentence, every unspoken word adding weight to the ever-growing chasm in our marriage. In that raw moment of confrontation, the comfortable lies we'd both clung to shattered completely. I could no longer trust the familiar warmth of our home, nor the woman I once adored. The truth, or whatever truth there was, lay buried under layers of denial and half-truths, and I was determined to dig it out, even if it meant tearing everything apart. After the explosive confrontation, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about Lydia's past held the key to today's chaos. Determined to piece together the fragments of her secrets, I decided to seek clarity outside our increasingly suffocating home. I headed to our local coffee shop, a small, familiar haven that once symbolized comfort and routine, and settled into a corner table, the murmur of quiet conversations providing a backdrop to my restless thoughts. It wasn't long before my old friend Mark joined me. Mark, who had known Lydia far longer than I had, carried an air of caution that always made me listen. "Jake, you look like you've been through hell," he said as he slid into the seat opposite me. I wasted no time recounting the morning's events. The off-putting odor, the bitter taste, the locked drawer, and the heated exchange that left me more confused than angry. Mark's expression darkened as he leaned in closer. "Remember a few months back when she mentioned an urgent business meeting? The one she brushed off so casually? There was something about that. Something you didn't ask about," he murmured. I frowned, my mind racing back to vague memories of hushed conversations and elusive hints. "Yeah, she said it was just a client meeting. But now, everything seems to add up. The secretive glances, those odd phone calls." He lowered his voice even further. "And don't forget, there was that summer when she vanished for weeks without explanation. I heard whispers. People said she was involved in something pretty shady. I always wondered why you never probed deeper." His words reverberated in my mind as flashes of subtle hints and covert messages surfaced from previous encounters. The dinner parties, the encrypted emails on her laptop, and even the offhand remarks during family gatherings. All of it now painted a picture of a woman hiding a labyrinth of secrets. "Jake, I'm telling you, there's more to her than she lets on. You need to be cautious. Sometimes secrets are buried for a reason," Mark warned, his tone both sympathetic and grave. As I sipped my cooling coffee, the pieces of a long-overlooked puzzle began to form a darker, more disturbing picture. Was Lydia shielding us from a dangerous past, or was she orchestrating this betrayal all along? Leaving the coffee shop that day, I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. One thing was clear. The past held the answers to the mystery of Lydia's secretive behavior, and I was now more determined than ever to uncover them, even if it meant confronting a truth that could shatter everything I once believed. After leaving the coffee shop with Mark's revelations echoing in my head, I found myself wandering the dimly lit city streets late at night. The chill in the air did nothing to calm the turmoil inside me. My mind was racing with questions, and the weight of uncertainty pressed down on every step I took. Just as I passed a deserted alley near an abandoned warehouse, my phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. The text read, "You are in too deep." I froze, scanning the dark street, when a figure in a long, dark coat emerged from the shadows. The stranger's eyes, barely visible under the dim streetlight, held an intensity that made my heart pound even faster. "Jake, it's time you knew the truth," the stranger murmured in a low, gravelly voice. I stopped in my tracks, my instinct screaming to run, yet a part of me compelled me to listen. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger. Without answering directly, he reached into his coat and handed me a worn envelope. "Inside, you'll find what you need to understand. Everything you think you know about Lydia, the tea, it's all part of something much larger." I took the envelope with trembling hands. "What do you mean, larger? Are you saying she wasn't doing this on her own? I pressed, my eyes fixed on his shadowed face. He gave a short, bitter laugh. You think she's poisoning you, don't you? That's just the tip of the iceberg. The real scheme goes beyond your home. It involves secret meetings, hidden financial records, and yes, those locked drawers. Before I could ask another question, the stranger stepped back, blending into the darkness, and vanished as silently as he had appeared. With my heart still racing, I found a quiet corner under a flickering street lamp to open the envelope. Inside were several photographs. Lydia in covert discussions with a mysterious man, blurry images of confidential documents, and even a series of text exchanges that hinted at an elaborate, concealed agenda. Each piece of evidence shattered my previous certainty, leaving me grappling with a terrifying possibility. Was Lydia merely a pawn in someone else's dangerous game? No sooner had I processed the shocking contents than my phone buzzed again. Another message, equally cryptic. Stay alert, Jake. The game has just begun. The words sent a chill down my spine, reinforcing the reality that I was now entangled in a far more sinister plot than I had ever imagined. Standing alone on that cold, empty pavement, the city's darkness seemed to mirror the profound deception swirling around me. Every clue pointed to a labyrinth of secrets, and with each step, I was forced to confront the horrifying truth that nothing was as it seemed. Ever since that mysterious envelope, I felt the world closing in on me. That nagging feeling of being watched grew into a full-blown paranoia. Today, it hit me hard at work. I walked into the office with my heart racing, every familiar face now a potential enemy. During a tense meeting, I caught whispers from colleagues and furtive glances that sent shivers down my spine. At lunch, I stepped out to clear my head, but the city itself seemed to conspire against me. I noticed a man in a dark suit lingering near the building. When I tried to approach him, he melted into the crowd. Jake, are you all right? My coworker then asked, noticing my jittery state. Yeah, just tired, I replied, my voice shaky, even as my mind screamed that I was being set up. Later, a sudden text on my phone. They're closer than you think, made my pulse spike. I couldn't tell if it was another anonymous tip or a cruel joke, but the message deepened my distrust. That evening, I found myself at a hospital, not for any ailment of my own, but because a friend needed comforting after a minor mishap. The sterile hallways, the hushed conversations, and the cold stares of the nurses only amplified my unease. In the waiting room, I overheard a snippet of conversation. Can't let him know too much. It was too vague to be meaningless. After the hospital visit, I returned to work late, the office bathed in the ghostly glow of computer screens. Every shadow in the corridor seemed to hide someone plotting against me. During a brief pause, I confronted my friend Dave in a hushed tone. Dave, have you noticed anything weird? Like someone always watching us? He looked at me, puzzled. Man, you're on edge. Maybe you should take a break. But his words did little to calm my racing thoughts. By the time I got home, I was exhausted, not from physical labor, but from the relentless barrage of doubts and suspicions. Sitting in the dim light of my apartment, I replayed the day's events in my head. Every fleeting glance, every offhand comment, now felt like a deliberate act of betrayal. I muttered, "It's all a goddamn conspiracy," as I locked the door behind me. The idea that someone, maybe even Lydia, could be orchestrating this madness pushed me to the edge of sanity. The distinction between real threats and my own spiraling paranoia blurred until I couldn't tell them apart. Tonight, sleep eludes me, replaced by the haunting thought that the enemy might be lurking right behind the next closed door. Today, every second felt like a ticking bomb. I sat at my desk, surrounded by scattered notes, photographs, and text messages, each one a fragment of a puzzle that refused to reveal its full picture. The cryptic messages kept coming, each one more urgent than the last. My phone buzzed with a new alert. Time is running out, Jake. Act now. The words echoed in my mind, fueling a mounting sense of dread. I couldn't ignore the overwhelming feeling that I was nearing a turning point. Determined to piece everything together, I reviewed the evidence one more time. There was the envelope with the damning photos of Lydia, the the covert conversations Mark had reluctantly confirmed, and a series of encrypted messages that hinted at a larger conspiracy. Every piece pointed to a truth that I wasn't sure I was ready to face. Unable to wait any longer, I called Mark. "Mark, I'm at my wit's end," I said, my voice tense with urgency. "These clues, they're not adding up. It feels like there's a deadline I can't see." There was a heavy pause on the other end before he responded. "Jake, you need to brace yourself. I've heard whispers about a major meeting scheduled for tomorrow, something that could expose the whole network. You might be caught in the crossfire if you don't act fast." The conversation left me reeling. I immediately retraced my steps from the previous nights, recalling the deserted alley and that fleeting glimpse of the mysterious stranger. I ventured out into the night, retracing my route along the dimly lit streets. The cold air did little to numb the anxiety that had taken over my mind. Every shadow seemed to conceal another secret, every echo another warning. Back in my apartment, I double-checked every detail, every timestamp. "The clock is ticking," I muttered under my breath, feeling the weight of inevitability. My eyes fixed on the digital clock blinking relentlessly on my wall. It was as if the seconds were mocking me. The evidence, the warnings, the unanswered questions, they were all converging into one final moment of reckoning. I sat down, heart pounding, and resolved that by tomorrow, I would confront everything head-on, no matter the cost. The countdown had begun, and I had no choice but to step into the storm, chasing a truth that could shatter my world forever. Back at home, everything that had been hidden began to spill into the open. I found Lydia in the living room, sitting on the edge of our worn-out sofa as if she knew the storm was coming. The air was thick with tension and the unsaid words of a crumbling trust. I couldn't hold back any longer. "Lydia," I started, voice rough with a mix of anger and despair, "I've got every piece of evidence you tried to hide. The photos, the texts, even those meetings you thought I wouldn't notice." I slammed a handful of crumpled notes onto the coffee table, each one a testament to her secrets. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, the cold mask of indifference faltered. "Jake, you don't understand," she whispered, but I cut her off. "Understand what? That you've been living a double life? That you're involved in something way beyond what you ever admitted?" I demanded, my words laced with hurt and disbelief. Lydia's voice trembled as she replied, "I was trying to protect us, to protect you from something dangerous. Something that I got dragged into against my will." Her admission sent a shiver down my spine, but it didn't quell my fury. "Protect us? You nearly killed me, Lydia. You poisoned me with that tea, and you lied about every damn thing," I countered, pacing back and forth. The familiar room now felt like a confessional of our deepest betrayals. She looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. "I never wanted it to go this far. I thought I could handle it, that I could keep it all separate from our life. But it spiraled out of control." Her voice cracked, filled with regret and a desperate need for forgiveness. I sank into the sofa, my mind a whirlwind of shattered certainties. "Then why didn't you just tell me the truth from the start?" I asked softly, the anger giving way to a raw sadness. Lydia hesitated before answering. "I was scared. Scared of losing you. Scared of what would happen if the truth came out." Our conversation grew quieter, the explosive accusations now replaced by a sorrowful reckoning. Every word we exchanged laid bare the deep fractures in our marriage. I realized that while some secrets had been revealed, many more still lay buried beneath layers of fear and deceit. Even as I pressed for answers, Lydia's vague explanations left more questions than they answered. In that painful silence, it became clear that trust was irreparably broken. The certainty I once clung to was crumbling, replaced by a haunting ambiguity, one that promised that the real truth, hidden in the shadows, might never be fully uncovered. Today began with an oppressive silence that felt heavier than any secret I'd ever known. I woke up before dawn, the digital clock glaring its relentless countdown at me. With every passing minute, I knew the time had come to face the truth once and for all. I found Lydia in our dimly lit living room, seated on the edge of our old, familiar sofa. Her eyes, tired and haunted, met mine with a mix of sorrow and resignation. "Jake, We've been dancing around this for too long, I said, my voice barely masking the storm of emotions inside. I need you to tell me everything. No more half answers. Lydia sighed deeply, the weight of unspoken confessions pressing down on her. I wish I could, Jake, she began, her tone trembling. Some truths, they're dangerous. I did what I thought was best to protect us. Her words hung in the air, ambiguous and unsettling. I pressed on. Protect us? Poisoning me with that tea isn't protection, Lydia. It's betrayal. Who are you really trying to shield me from? A long pause stretched between us. Outside, the early morning light barely seeped through the curtains, and the only sound was the distant hum of the waking city. Finally, Lydia spoke. There are forces at play, things I got entangled with long before you ever knew. I never meant for any of this to hurt you. Her eyes welled up, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of a woman overwhelmed by circumstances beyond her control. I leaned forward, my frustration mixing with a desperate need for clarity. Then why keep it all hidden? Why risk everything with secrets and lies? I demanded. She shook her head slowly. Because the truth isn't as simple as you think. Every revelation has its price, and sometimes the cost is too high. As the morning wore on, our conversation oscillated between heated arguments and tearful admissions. The evidence, the mysterious texts, the covert meetings, the envelope filled with damning photos, lay scattered on the coffee table like shattered remnants of our past. Yet, even with all these pieces, the full picture remained elusive. I realized that while I had uncovered many of her secrets, a deeper mystery still lurked in the shadows. By noon, the tension had reached its peak. I stood by the window, watching the sunlight slowly chase away the darkness of the night. So what now? I asked softly, more to myself than to her. Do we try to fix what's broken? Or do we let these shadows consume us completely? Lydia didn't have an answer. Instead, she whispered, I'm sorry, Jake. I truly am. In that poignant moment, I understood that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. The truth, tangled in a web of lies and half-confessions, continued to haunt us both. And as I stepped outside into a world still cloaked in uncertainty, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger, unending story.